land to think you can raise this amount of money without taxing the 95%. It's not as simple as you can just tax the 5% and everything will just fall off a tree and everything will be great. The reality is that it's very hard to raise this kind of money that Corbyn wants to, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to do so, and I don't think it's actually possible with his manifesto.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no point having a costed manifesto if even the IFS say that it doesn't make any sense and you can't raise this amount of money.
If you just tuned in, let me just reintroduce my guest to you. Zach Carr is supporting the Liberal Democrats, Luke King is supporting the Conservatives, Sebastian Cheek is supporting UKIP, and we have George Aylett on the line with us. Unfortunately, our Labour guest hasn't shown up. We hope she's on her way, but you never know. George, obviously, as Zach said, that the cost of Labour's manifesto is something that's being highlighted, though actually it hasn't really become a huge electoral issue over the last 2 weeks. What do you think is going to be the big issue over the next week, particularly for young people?
Particularly for young people, I think many factors have to be considered. I will come back to the point about the manifesto. Labour's manifesto is the only one that is actually fully costed, £48.6 billion, and they've laid that out on a few pages.
Can I just interject there for a second?
Well, no, let him go on. Let him go on for the moment.
Sure. But the big issues affecting, obviously, Brexit will be massive. I think education will be massive, but particularly for young people, it's about the future that young people want. And I think Labour are actually saying you don't have to be raddled with debt for the rest of your life. If you want highly paid jobs and you want a job, then voting Labour is the only way to do that. So I think it's about looking out for young people and showing the future that young people want and need. And if they want to go into the world of work, then they have an adequate job. And if they don't, then they'll have good education. So I think education and jobs will be big issues for young people.
I think you made the point
Sebastian for UKIP.
I think you make the point, or you made the point, of your manifesto being the only one Labour manifesto being the only one that's fully costed. And the Labour Party will say that theirs is costed, and the Lib Dems will say that theirs is costed, the Greens will say that theirs was costed. The only manifesto that's been fully costed is UKIP's, and I'll tell you why. Because we sent it off to an independent economic advisor, and we've said, look, obviously...
You did that at the last election. Have you done it this time? Have you had time?
I think we have. Don't hold me to that. But it's almost the same manifesto as it was in 2015. Certainly the economic policy is almost exactly the same. Now, we said, of course, we think it's costed. Which party wouldn't? But we've said, this is here you go. Is it costed? Tell us honestly, yes or no. And they said yes.
OK.
It's the only manifesto that's fully costed.
George Aylett, I hope you can stay with us over the next 45 minutes as well. We will come back to our panel in a moment, and we're going to take your calls. If you have a question for any of our panellists, if you're under 25, fantastic. If you're not, that's OK too, because we're not going to exclude older voters from this. Otherwise, I'd have to step down from this position, which I don't really want to do. This is LBC. It's 11:16.
This is LBC.
The Property Hour is here every Thursday evening from 9 on LBC, with information and news for anyone on the property ladder.
So I'm looking at what's a good area, what I can invest in.
If you missed last week's show, then head to lbc.co.uk, where you can download a podcast and enter to win £200 of vouchers and a selection of home gadgets. The LBC Property Hour with Direct Line Landlord Insurance. For de facto 5-star rated insurance, search Direct Line Landlord.
Nobody likes to feel they're missing out, do they? So what does 7 million Honda CR-V drivers know that you don't? Why don't you see for yourself? Test drive the world's best-selling SUV before June 11th and we'll give you £500 off the list price. That's on top of a substantial deposit contribution and 5.9% APR representative. Visit honda.co.uk/CRV500 today. Limited time only. Available when purchased with Honda Aspirations personal contract purchase. Terms and conditions apply. See honda.co.uk for details. Indemnities may be required in certain circumstances. Finance is only available to persons aged 18 or over, subject to status. Credit provided by Honda Finance Europe plc.
The big red building on Golders Green Road.
The menswear specialists Gold's Factory Outlet are holding their biggest ever sale, and it's on now. Genuine savings, 50% off all suits, jackets, coats, shirts, trousers, even designer brands in sizes up to 72-inch chest and portly fittings. Everything must go at Gold's, 110 to 114 Golders Green Road. Open Sunday to Friday till 6, closed Saturday.
The big red building on Golders Green Road.
It was hard for me to talk about the fact that I got out of breath easily. I tried to hide it. I began to carry less at work, and I just thought it was down to getting older. I wish I'd gone to the doctors earlier. because now it's even harder for me to talk about it.
Getting out of breath doing things you used to be able to do could be a sign of lung or heart disease or even cancer. Finding it early makes it more treatable, so don't ignore it. Tell your doctor. Be clear on cancer.
People who've had their dental implants at TDC Implant Centre have had their lives transformed.
I had problems with other dentists who said it was just too complicated.
I'm Dr. Michael Zivitz. Even if your own dentist has told you nothing can be done, talk to us. Our award-winning treatment could give you a life-changing smile. In just one day, we'll give you a full set of beautiful teeth fixed in your mouth. Around 3 months later, we exchange your fixed teeth for a new permanent set.
I just wanted to get it sorted properly so I had permanent teeth again.
So see smileinaday.co.uk.
On a travel pack tailor-made holiday, you get to see the very best of the world. Tour the famous Route 66, the spectacular Canadian Rockies. Experience the magic and history of India, the wilds of Africa, or the exotic Far East. Start your journey with Travel Pack. For amazing prices on your tailor-made holiday of a lifetime, call Travel Pack today on 0208 903 9999 or visit travelpack.com. Atoll protected.
Ian Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Coming up to 11:20. If you'd like to watch us, so we're on Facebook Live, and you can watch us via the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. It's our Millennials debate. We have 4 young voters with us, first-time voters, 3 in the studio, 1 on FaceTime. That's George Aylett representing Labour. We have Zach Carr representing the Liberal Democrats, Luke King representing the Conservatives, and Sebastian Cheek representing UKIP. If you're wondering why we're all male this morning, I do apologise for that, but our female Labour representative unfortunately hasn't turned up. I think we'll go to your calls. 0345 6060 973. If you're a young voter, if you'd like to put a question to our panel, be my guest. Robin in Belvedere is our first guest. Robin, what would you like to say?
I wanted to say that I fully support, I have a lot of good vibes about the Labour Manifesto and what they stand for. My only thing is obviously their history and their lovely little letter that they left in the office when they left.
You're talking about Liam Byrne's note to David Laws, there's no money left in the Treasury.
Yeah, so that's the only thing that I'm a bit like, about.
George, how can you reassure Robin?
Well, I would say that actually, under the last 7 years, the Conservatives have accumulated more debt than every single Labour government combined. And past Labour governments have delivered for young people. That's the reason why we have the NHS, the minimum wage, the welfare state, maternity pay, paternity leave. We have the banning of cluster bombs, the first ever Climate Change Act, etc., etc. I think it was a different time back then. We had the 2007-2008 global financial crisis. That's why the deficit was skyrocketing. The Conservatives have failed to deliver their promise on the deficit time after time again. In fact, they're delaying it to 2025 now, when they promised to abolish it in 2015. Labour's plan is fully funded and the deficit will eventually go down, but I think we've got to look at the country that we want. I think we want to see investment, to see a growing economy, not cuts which will massively affect young people.
Luke, obviously Robin is thinking of voting Labour. Can you persuade her over?
What I would say is, when you look at the Labour manifesto, there are things that sound great, and it sounds like everyone's going to live a great, happy life, everything's going to be free, and everything's going to be amazing. But the reality is, as I said, the IFS have said that it is not fully funded. No matter what they say, it will not be able to raise that amount of money. I mean, the last time we had such hard left policies, we had, I think it was Callaghan and the winter of discontent. So I can't imagine a system where we can spend all this money and at the same time build a great economy. I think the reality is, if you invest as much as Labour want to into public services and into tuition fees and all of these areas, all you're going to end up with is a short term, maybe for a year they'll last well, but then after that the economy is going to be at its knees and everyone's going to be taxed to the hilt.
Robin, if you didn't vote Labour, what would your second choice be? Liberal Democrats. Right, OK, Zach Carr, 1 minute, persuade her.
Well, I think the leader of Lib Dem, Tim Farron, I think he's a great guy. I think when it comes to young voters, OK, he's 46, but I think that's the youngest out of the main political part. Paul Nuttall from UKIP, he doesn't count. He may be 40, but he's not even an MP. I think Tim Farron is in touch. You looked at their launch of their party manifesto. It was in a sort of club. OK, it was a bit cheesy compared to the big American Democrat-Republican conventions. It was quite low-key. It was a bit cheesy with all the yellow flashing lights. But I do think the Lib Dem party are in touch with the younger voter, and I do think, I hate to use the saying, they are a bit down with the kids. I think Tim Farron is more... I think he's a more likeable, a more electable leader to someone from my generation than perhaps Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn.
What do you make of... I'll come back to you in a second, Robin. What do you make, Zach, of this row about his views on homosexuality, where he keeps refusing to say that he doesn't think it's a sin?
Well, I think it's a touchy subject. I did hear you yesterday grilling him on it. It
was actually Nick Ferrari, but
yes,
it's easy to confuse us.
I think it is a bit of a touchy subject, but at the end of the day, it's his personal views, and if he's come out and his party and his manifesto has said they're in support of LGBT rights, and they will be doing a lot. I think they'll be doing a lot more than the UKIP or Tory parties will be. I think then you just have to go with him. I think he should have said what his rights were, but however they are his personal rights and it's a personal faith.
Robin, final word to you.
I'm seriously going to consider Liberal Democrat a little bit more now, hearing about that.
Thank you.
I'm going to do a bit more research.
But you're ignoring what Luke said about the Conservatives.
No. But with the Labour and the triple lock, I think if it's in place now or sooner, and it's in office, I don't know the word, in office for that amount of time, if someone tries to take it away, they'll be like, well, no, because he's been there for that amount of time, by the time that I'm ready to retire and get my pension.
Robin, can I just ask quickly?
Yeah.
Do you see Jeremy Corbyn as the next Prime Minister of this country? Do you think he's the right person to take us forward?
Well, I don't know. It seems a bit dodgy sometimes.
I mean, can you imagine Jeremy Corbyn going to meet Donald Trump and try to negotiate some sort of trade deal, or to sit in front of the 27 member states of the European Union and negotiate? I can't imagine him.
I think he'd
getting
be an
anywhere.
awful representative for our country.
Jeremy Corbyn winding Donald Trump up, but then outside there being a bust up. So I wouldn't mind seeing that, but...
Be great TV.
OK, Robin, thank you very much for that. George Aylett, Jeremy Corbyn, well dodge.
Well, what does that mean?
You tell me.
Well, I think his plan for Britain is actually quite good. You know, he's been a politician since 1983, and I think he's a principled man. Every time
I think you've said it right there. He's been a politician since 1973. He hasn't ever had a real job.
1983.
How would he deal with Donald Trump, though, George?
Oh, he'd be very good with Donald Trump. Imagine that. I think he'd be very good, because I think he would actually stand up to Donald Trump, not just go hand in hand, walking down the aisle, essentially.
Stand up versus ally.
I'd like to just make a point there, though. I understand what you're saying, George, but the reality is, if we're going to leave the European Union, whether you are a leaver or remainer, we have to acknowledge that it is going to be a difficult path that Britain's going to take, and we're going to be even more reliant on the United States. And if Jeremy Corbyn's going to come in and then just start a bust up with Donald Trump, it's not really the most pragmatic thing to do if we're going to be heavily dependent on them after we've left the European Union.
You talk about Brexit there. You know, who are the people that we want negotiating Brexit? Boris Johnson. Or do we want some? He has experience like Keir Starmer, Emily Thornberry, and I think they would be much better at negotiating.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. I think you, Theresa May.
Let's not, because I think we're going to come on to that a little bit later with a question. So let's go to Dylan, who's in Northwood. Hello, Dylan.
I just wanted to address the Conservative guy. He said that the Conservatives are the only serious party that can actually tackle the national debt. But I just wanted to ask. I wanted to ask him two questions. One, why the hell is the national debt grown by so much? And two, if the Conservatives are so good at stopping the growth of the national debt, then why are they always in favour of a policy of quantitative easing with the Bank of England, which is just artificially pushing down interest rates to then provoke businesses into bringing loans in? Because if they really were about reducing the national debt, they wouldn't support quantitative easing. They would allow the interest rates to settle to the free market.
Dylan, it says on my screen you're 16. Are you studying economics?
Oh, I would like to next year, yeah.
Well, you should, because you know more about it than I do. I got grade E A level, so I know nothing about it. Luke King for the Conservatives, answer Dylan's point.
As I said, I'm not an economic expert by any stretch either. But what I can say though, is that when the Conservatives did take office in 2010, the Treasury was in a mess. As we've already heard about the note to say that there's no money left. I think the Conservatives were left took over the Treasury when it was in an absolute mess, and I think what they've done so far is pretty good. The annual deficit's gone from, I think, 150 billion down to 40 billion. So there are areas where they can be improved, where we can improve, but compared to the Labour, where the spending was so high.
Why is it, though, that they promised to eliminate the debt by 2015, the deficit by 2015, it then became 2017, then 2019, it's now 2025. How can anyone trust them to do it by then?
Well, I think that is it's a failed area where the Conservatives have failed to reduce the deficit, and I don't...
See, this is why this format is brilliant, because if we had a Tory politician sitting there, we'd be having a load of spin about strong and stable. He's actually admitting they haven't done well enough, Dylan.
Yeah, and I think that doesn't... Just because the Conservatives have failed in one area does not mean that I would not vote for them based on other areas. And I think it's very naive to assume, not saying that you are, but I think a lot of people would attack certain areas and then assume that just on that area you shouldn't vote for the Conservatives.
And what do you think about the other parties' policies on the national debt, Dylan?
Well, I think this support of a policy of QE, it actually is actually an argument against the stupidity of Jeremy Corbyn, because at the end of the day, quantitative easing is a socialist policy. It's more left wing. It's about government control of interest rates. So I obviously, I'm quite right wing when it comes to the economy. But actually, the Conservatives on this issue are fairly towards the middle, maybe even on the left.
Okay, let's bring in George Aylett on this for Labour. The debt policy, on the face of it, George, it's quite a difficult one for Labour, because if you're saying we're going to borrow another 48 billion and there's a 500 billion figure over the course of a parliament for sort of investment in infrastructure and all the rest of it, that surely has got to increase the deficit and debt.
Well, you say that again. The manifesto is fully funded, and the deficit will go down. Even the IFS say that. But the point about borrowing in the National Investment Bank, £500 billion over the course of the Parliament, I think when interest rates are at their lowest for over 300 years, borrowing to invest in the economy actually does make economic sense. You've got to have stimulus in order to grow the economy, and I think that's the good thing to do. But like I say, the IFS say the deficit will fall under Labour. And I think the choice that we're giving to young people is this. Will the deficit fall under Labour? Yes, it will. Will it fall under the Conservatives when they broke their promise in 2010 when they were elected, saying they would wipe the deficit by 2015? No. When they were elected in 2015, they said the deficit would be wiped by 2020. No, it will not. And now they're saying in 2017... will the deficit be gone by 2025? They keep delaying over and over again.
Would you give them any credit for the fact that over the past few years they've actually had higher growth levels than any other European country?
You may say that, but also wages haven't grown as well. We're the only G7 nation where the economy is growing, but wages are not. The effects of growth are not being felt by people all across the country. Therefore, their plan has not really worked. You may say the economy is growing, but if the people aren't feeling benefits from it, then what's the point? I think people want to feel the benefits of that growth.
George, thank you for that. Couple of texts. Brian in Fulham says, Goddy, and they're so clever and articulate. When I was their age, I was still in bed with nothing on my mind but my hair. That says Brian, age 42 3/4. And someone else says, amazing, these young people are showing us how to debate. Send the podcast to those involved in the dreadful leaders debate. Great job. Well, we've got another half an hour. If you would like to ask our panellists a question, 0345 6060 973. It's the LBC Millennials debate. We are on Facebook Live. At least we will be back in a couple of minutes after the news headlines at 11:31 with Moira Alderson.
A 24-year-old man is being questioned by police in connection with the suicide bombing at Manchester Arena that killed 22 people. He was arrested in the Rusholme area of the city last night. A senior Tory minister has promised there won't be any income tax rises if his party wins the general election. Sir Michael Fallon's comments to the Daily Telegraph go further than the Tory manifesto, which doesn't explicitly rule out increases. Meanwhile, Labour is challenging the Prime Minister to reveal the impact of her controversial social care policy. Jeremy Corbyn says it's staggering that pensioners haven't been given more details on care caps. 18 people have now died after being stabbed in London over the last 6 weeks. The latest is a teenager who was attacked in Peckham last night. LBC Weather, a mostly dry and bright day with plenty of sunny spells, some heavy and thundery rain for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a high of 21 degrees.
This is LBC.
If you've had a for 3 weeks or more, you should go and see your doctor. It could be a sign of lung disease, including cancer. It's probably nothing serious, but if it is, then finding it early makes it more treatable. So if you've had any sort of persistent for 3 weeks or more, don't ignore it. Tell your doctor. Be clear on cancer.
It's Super Weekend at Lidl with up to 50% off selected products. Get a bottle of Bordeaux AOP for just $3.29. A squeezy bottle of Clear Blossom Honey only 99p. A bag of Fruit and Nutter Luxury Fruit Muesli just 99p. And a kilo of Flavour Jogger also 99p. Lidl, big on quality, little on price. Subject to availability and my various selected stores while stocks last.
When you're trying to find the perfect cruise for you, Virgin Holidays knows what's what. For instance, if you like to feel the wind in your hair, here at the Royal Caribbean, they have a zipline experience at precisely 9 stories high.
This is the perfect altitude for you to feel the adrenaline rush through your body and still be able to enjoy the amazing views of the Caribbean.
We know what makes a cruise. If you want to know more, visit your nearest Virgin Holidays store. Virgin Holidays. Seize the holiday. ATOL protected.
When patients come to us for help, many of them have been living with painful, disfigured teeth for years.
I think I only had about 4 or 5 of my own top front teeth left.
I'm Dr. Michael Zibitz, Senior Clinician at TDC Dental Implants. In just one day, we'll give you a full set of beautiful teeth fixed in your mouth.
Changed my diet, changed my exercise, and I think it all stems from feeling more confident.
Around 3 months later, we exchange your fixed teeth for a new permanent set. For details, visit smileinaday.co.uk.
My thing, Guatemalan cortado. As coffees go, it's pretty lively. Must have smashed out 24 spreadsheets in half an hour. Boom. Which is, funnily enough, what my laptop did when I spilt my cortado all over it. Oh, no! So, I need a new one. 15-inch display, 1 terabyte hard drive, and no big price tag. Refurb it is.
Jake's thing. It's got to be a refurbished laptop from eBay. That's as good as new with 12-month seller warranty. Buy refurbished tech on eBay and save up to 50% versus new. eBay. Find your thing.
I've broken down, Churchy. Cars like me belong in the fast lane, not the hard shoulder.
Oh, yes.
Oh, now I'm really going to blow a gasket.
No.
Don't end up stranded when you break down. Churchill offers new motor customers free breakdown cover.
Oh, Churchy, my knight in furry armour.
Oh.
Churchill. Depend on the dog. First year free breakdown service provided by Green Flag, roadside only. New business policies only. Excludes NI, underwritten by UK Insurance Limited. Terms and conditions apply.
Ian Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
It's 11:35 here on LBC. You're listening to the LBC Millennials debate. We have 4 young people with us, 3 in the studio, 1 on FaceTime, which I suppose is the modern way of doing things. We had hoped to have a Labour representative in the studio, but she hasn't turned up. We're not quite sure why. Hope she's okay. Let me introduce you to our panel. George Aylett is supporting Labour. He's with us on FaceTime. Sebastian Cheek is here from UKIP. Luke King is supporting the Conservatives, and Zach Carr is supporting the Liberal Democrats. We're going to carry on with your calls now. Lots of calls coming in. Some really, really nice comments on texts and tweets as well, which is unusual because normally I just get abuse on these texts and tweets. You can, of course, watch us if you want to see what we're doing. We're on Facebook Live and on the LBC website live. Kadir is in Stevenage. Hi, Kadir. What would you like to say?
Hi, Ian. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. What would you like to talk about?
Yeah, I just want to make a quick point. I mean, from all the politicians that are running in this campaign, just for me personally, it seems like Jeremy Corbyn has been the only politician to actually at least attempt to connect with the youth or try and get, the message out there to the young electorate who have never really attempted to vote before. So just on that basis, I think Jeremy Corbyn has been the only politician that's put himself out there to at least connect, basically.
Luke King for the Conservatives. That's a fair point, isn't it?
I think to some degree it is, but I also think Jeremy Corbyn has gone about doing it by targeting things like, I don't remember the grime artist that he's been seen with and all of these different things, but I don't think that's necessarily the right way to get your policy across. I think it should be to argue the policy publicly, to talk about it, but not necessarily just to target young people by associating yourself with people that they like and people that they listen to. I don't think necessarily that's the best way to go about it.
Well, can I just interrupt Luke there? Luke talks about the way Corbyn and Labour are going about how they're campaigning, talking about their policies. I think the way the Tories have handled this election campaign has been not just bad. I think it's been quite disgusting and disgraceful. It's been just pure negative campaigning from Theresa May. they're not promoting themselves. They're not talking about how they're the best party to take us through Brexit, to take us through the next 5 years. All Theresa May has done the last 6-7 weeks is just bash Corbyn and just talk so much ill of him. And I mean, to be honest, I agree. I think Corbyn's awful. He'd make an awful Prime Minister.
Yeah, I agree with her. I think Theresa May is. It seems like she's taken, especially the young voters, for months. Really, she doesn't seem to actually care about what we think. They probably assume that we're not even going to come out and vote. But I've got a feeling in this election, especially, that the young people actually want to see a change. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see lots and lots and lots of young people out on election day, ready to vote.
I think in response to
Sebastian for UKIP.
I think in response to your original point about how he's tried to get some young voters and try and connect with the youth, I think a lot of that is obviously good. You should try and connect with the youth where you can, but I think a lot of that is him saying, I will give you this free stuff. I will give you free this and free that and free that. Don't ask where the money's coming from, but trust that you'll get it for free. Free tuition fees, student debt forgiveness, and all these things which are completely uncosted. Anybody can see that. There's a huge black hole, what is it, 40 billion, 50 billion in the manifesto? You need to obviously take their promises with a pinch of salt when they say free this, free that. Ask where the money's coming from.
George Aylett for Labour. Now, obviously, you're going to agree that Corbyn has engaged with the youth vote. But let's move the discussion on a little bit. Do you think that Jeremy Corbyn has been treated fairly in this campaign? Not by the Conservatives, obviously, they're not going to treat him fairly, but more generally by the media, because a lot of his supporters seem to think that we haven't treated him fairly.
I think he actually has received lots of coverage, lots of positive coverage, and I think it's been absolutely fantastic. And I think the real Jeremy Corbyn that's been, been elected twice, Labour leader, he's coming across very well. And in fact,
oh, George, I think we're going to get you on a phone line because FaceTime seems to be giving up on us there. Let's go, Kadir. Thank you very much for that. Let's go to Ben in Oxford. Ben, what would you like to ask?
Hi, I just wanted to, as a young person who's been interested in politics when most of my sort of generation have been ignoring it, I wanted to know their opinions on electoral reform and first past the post, because the problem that a lot of me and my friends find is that we agree with some policies from one party and some from another, and we really are left sort of with no, between a rock and a hard place. So for the biggest example is a lot of my friends think of free markets, that's the sort of thing we believe in, but we also oppose a lot of our military intervention abroad, and there's not really a party in Britain that we can vote for that would cross these two bridges, and I think voting reform would be the only way to solve that. However, I'm still stuck because I don't know what system we would use, because there's always flaws with all of them.
Well, that's a good point. Sebastian Chief UKIP, what do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. We are at a stage now where we need serious electoral reform. If you look at the last election, UKIP got, 4 million votes, and we got 1 seat. If you chuck in, I think it's the SNP, the Lib Dems, and I think the Greens, I'm probably wrong there, but of an equal stature, you've got 1 versus about 100. You need serious electoral reform because 4 million people are being represented by 1 person. There's no way that can be fair. And I understand the strengths with first past the post. You get sometimes a strong and stable government. But when that doesn't happen...
I thought we were going to get through this whole hour without that phrase being mentioned. You've let me down, Sebastian.
You do need a way of representing the 4 million, because 4 million for 1 is just not fair, and you both have to agree with that, surely.
Well, can I just interject and say...
Zach for the Lib Dems.
That question about the electoral reform, I studied politics at A-level, and I'm sure many of our listeners have been studying politics at A-level, have studied politics at some point in their education. And yes, first past the post isn't great. In fact, it's quite a bad system. It's not fair. UKIP did get 4 million votes 2 years ago, and they only got a couple of seats. 1 seat.
1 seat.
So it isn't fair. But however, look at the other reform systems, AV+, all the others, they just don't work. And unfortunately, I think we have to come to terms with first past the post is the best of a bad bunch.
So you're a Lib Dem who likes first past the post. I've never met one of those before.
I just think it's the most fair. I don't think it's completely fair, but I just think that we just have to stick with it.
Luke King for the Conservatives.
I agree. I think to an extent electoral reform is something there is clearly an argument there. But I think one thing which isn't challenged enough is the hypocrisy of a lot of people that call for electoral reform or don't call for electoral reform. A lot of people in the 2015 election that I know on the left, especially at university, were calling for we need electoral reform because it's unfair, because the Greens are getting X amount of votes and not getting enough seats. But as soon as you tell them, well, actually, UKIP got 4 million votes, and under most electoral reform systems, we would be now currently in a Conservative UKIP coalition. Everyone seems to put that throw their arms up in the air and say, well, that's not fair. We don't want electoral reform. And I think
George Aylett for Labour, do you think electoral reform would be a good idea? And let's introduce another subject. Do you think the voting age should be brought down to 16?
Well, I'm in a minority within the Labour Party. I do believe electoral reform is absolutely necessary. And I think models like the single transferable vote will be very good. For example, if we had STV in Wiltshire, there would be 2 Labour MPs there. Labour voters in Wiltshire aren't being represented, neither are Tory voters in Manchester or UKIP voters across the country. I don't think it's about the consequence of the results. You know, we would have 80-odd UKIP MPs, which I think would be abysmal. However, you know, it's a better model. I think electoral reform is absolutely necessary. And when it comes to votes at 16, you know, I'm very on the fence on this issue, and I'm willing to be convinced either way. But I think it should either go one of 2 ways. Either rights should be lowered to the age of 16, or, you know, everything is raised to the age of 18, essentially. You know, so if you want to get married, instead of having parental consent at 16, it would either be having it at 18 or, you know, lowering it to 16 and then having voting ages with that. So I think it should be basically a flat model, essentially.
Sebastian, 16?
This is going to be extremely controversial, but I'd raise it to 21.
Oh my
to be
goodness!
completely honest with you.
You're actually saying you shouldn't have a vote in this election?
I think all of us here, and probably everyone listening, is hugely political. Political fanatics watch Question Time, watch this, and all sorts of things. But we're in the minority, and there are hundreds of thousands of people in this country at our sort of age who just don't care. Who just don't care. At 21, you're starting to get to the age.
But for those who do.
Yes. Well, there are people who are 15 who care. There are people who are 11 who care. You know, would you lower the age to 11?
Well,
no.
clearly not.
You need to get to a stage where there's some sort of, you know, equilibrium. And I would say, arbitrarily, 21's the age.
I disagree. I think 18 is the fair age. I wouldn't lower it to 16. I think it has to be put at an arbitrary number. I mean, 18 is the age that you can drink alcohol and you can do a lot of other things. And I think it needs to be set arbitrarily because your argument that there are people that are under 21 that don't have a clue, the reality is there are people in their 60s and 70s that don't have a clue.
It's the scale.
No, exactly. But the reality is, I know a lot of people, like from my family. No one in my family's ever voted. I don't think they're
ever voted.
Ever voted? Never. I'm from a family of second-hand car dealers. No one has ever cared about politics in their lives.
Seriously,
no one's ever voted. And I'm from a family of 6 kids.
Are they going to vote this time?
I hope so. I'm trying to persuade them.
If they're listening now, what's your message to them?
Vote Tory.
Right, we're going to.
21.
Sorry.
Why 21? Sorry. Why not 18?
Well, the reason I would say 21 is that's the stage, and this is obviously quite arbitrary sort of debate, because you could say 19, you could say 20, and they're all sort of similar. I would say 21 because that's the rough age. People are leaving university, people are getting starting to get a first house, starting to rent, starting to form couples. I understand arguments for 18, 19 or 20. I would put the figure at 21, but I understand there's a huge margin of error there.
Because I completely disagree. Just quickly, just because people, when they become 18, they should be able to vote on issues that matter to them, and clearly tuition fees, even though it's against the Conservative policy, they should be able to abolish it. It's Labour policy. People should still be able to have a vote on issues like that, especially when it comes to university. I think it's wrong to just get rid of it.
Couple of texts before we go to a break. Ben, thank you very much indeed for that question, and that sparked a sparky debate here. Dead Cat on a text says, wow, the youth debate on LBC is outstanding. First time I've heard top quality debate throughout the entire election campaign. Duncan says, these young people have talked more sense in a more measured and unspiteful way in the last 25 minutes than I've heard from all the mainstream politicians in the entire campaign. Refreshing. You might think I'm being very selective in the ones that I'm reading out. I haven't seen a single text or tweet saying, oh, for goodness sake, move on, LBC. Well, we will at 12, but we've still got 15 more minutes. We might have to invite you back. Luke King, Zach Carr, Sebastian Cheek, George Aylett, great to have you with us. We'll take some more of your calls in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC, it's 11:46.
Coming up at 12 on LBC, Majid Noir's.
Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May faced a tough interrogation from a Question Time audience. How do you intend to prioritise between all the big issues in this campaign?
Majid Noir's on LBC.
When you're trying to find the perfect cruise for you, Virgin Holidays knows what's what. We know the length of the water slides, the temperature of the dry martinis, the second the sun hits the horizon, the decibel level of the fireworks, the size of every island we visit, the show times for the poolside movies, cooking time for the lobster, the salt they use for tequila, the name of each hop that makes the onboard craft beer, the height of the rock climbing wall. We even know the thread count of the bed linen. We know what makes a cruise. If you want to know more, visit your nearest Virgin Holidays store. Virgin Holidays. Seize the holiday. ATOL protected.
Punching the air, Sally jumps out of her Renault Traffic van. Winning her second gardening contract feels even better than the first. Topiary has a new champion. Renault Pro Plus vans are trusted as the logistics partner to the Renault Sport Formula One team, delivering vital components day in, day out. See how the award-winning Renault Pro Plus range can power your team with reliability and aftercare service you can count on. Visit one of our Renault Pro Plus specialist dealers to find out more.
My thing, my abs, they're big on Instagram. Well, they were until I dropped a dumbbell on my phone. Anyway, I need a replacement. 12 megapixel camera for maximum muscle definition. But my budget is lower than my body fat ratio. So, you know what? It's got to be refurb.
Russell's thing. It's clearly a refurbished smartphone from eBay. That's as good as new with 12-month seller warranty. Buy refurbished tech on eBay and save up to 50% versus new. eBay. Find your thing.
I don't want to redecorate my house. I want to sell it. Although, I must admit, it may be time to finally take down my Wham posters and actually wallpaper. But thanks to Property Rescue, you won't need to. You can exchange contracts within 48 hours regardless of its condition. So, no need to redecorate. And don't forget to ask about their cash advance. Get that just sold feeling with Property Rescue. Fast forward to sold at propertyrescue.co.uk.
People who've had their dental implants at TDC Implant Centre have had their lives transformed.
I had problems with other dentists who said it was just too complicated.
I'm Dr. Michael Zivitz. Even if your own dentist has told you nothing can be done, talk to us. Our award-winning treatment could give you a life-changing smile. In just one day, we'll give you a full set of beautiful teeth fixed in your mouth. Around 3 months later, we exchange your fixed teeth for a new permanent set.
I just wanted to get it sorted properly so I had permanent teeth again.
So see smileinaday.co.uk.
Ian Dale on LBC.
It's 11:49 here on LBC. You're listening to our Millennials debate. We will be taking more of your calls until 12 o'clock. Let's just reintroduce the panel. But before I do, a few people on text and Twitter are saying that they don't really believe we got a Labour representative for this debate and that somehow we're being biased. Angela says, how do we know LBC even got a Labour young speaker on? Very dodgy. Well, her name was Ava. She was on this programme, I think it was either 2 or 3 weeks ago. She was a brilliant caller. Like Luke, when he phoned you, we wanted to have her on. She confirmed that she was coming, but unfortunately it hasn't turned up. We've got a brilliant deputy for her, George Aylett. He's keeping his end up well, I think, in this debate, even though he's on the phone. And I can assure you, we didn't really want a panel of 4 male voices. So, well, there are lots of conspiracy theories, I suppose, but I can absolutely assure you we had booked her. Right, let's reintroduce the panel. As I say, George Aylett is representing Labour, Zach Carr from the Lib Dems, Luke King from the Conservatives, and Sebastian Cheek from UKIP. Max is in Nottingham. Hello, Max.
Hi, I just wanted to speak a bit about policy, and tuition fees has been mentioned a few times. And I just wanted to say I find that the Labour Manifesto, the commitment to abolish tuition fees, is really quite a cynical move. And often the Conservatives are accused of trying to buy the grey vote with the triple lock or pensions pledges. But this is really expensive and the wrong priority. I don't know if the panel agree, but the IFS has basically come out and said that only really rich graduates will benefit from not having any fees. So is this really the right priority for a potential Labour government?
George Aylett?
It is, yeah. And I think most countries across the Western world actually have abolished their tuition fees. And I think it is the right thing to do. I'm currently sat on a university campus. I'm on the University of Hull. The vast majority, actually everyone on this university, will graduate with over £50,000 worth of debt. And I don't think that's the right thing. I think we should be looking differently to universities. I think we should be looking towards Germany, a centre-right country which actually abolished their tuition fees. They have seen young people benefit significantly from doing this policy. It's stimulated growth in the local economy, but I also think it goes beyond that as well. I think it's about investing in apprenticeships and saying, for those who don't want to go to university, and if you go into the world of work, that you have an adequate wage, a £10 an hour minimum wage. So if you go to university, you won't pay fees. And if you,
just before I bring in Luke, George, did I not read yesterday, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure Jeremy Corbyn said yesterday in a speech that he wanted to cancel the debt of people who've already gone to university. I mean, that would add a huge amount to the cost, wouldn't it?
I've only seen that in the tab, and that's it. And, I don't know whether that's true or not, but he wants to abolish tuition fees as soon as possible, so by September this year for new students, and I think that would be the right thing to do.
Okay.
But about the pledge too. Yeah,
Luke, what's the tab?
The Tab's a student online
I can be forgiven for not knowing.
Paper, yeah.
What's your response to what George said?
I understand that, and it does make sense in theory, but in practice, if you use Scotland as an example where there isn't tuition fees, I mean, the main argument Labour are proposing, even yesterday, Corbyn on the debates, he was saying that the main reason we need to abolish tuition fees is to help disadvantaged children, disadvantaged kids, because they have less chance of going to university. But in reality, in Scotland, you're half as likely to go to university if you're from a disadvantaged background, because the universities, because it's not £9,000 a year anymore, and the government subsidise it, there's less places, and therefore the universities try and take in more foreign students who pay at the moment something like £17,000, and on top of that there's only going to be a limited number of places, and so the brightest will get in, and those kids tend to have tutors or extra help which the disadvantaged kids can't get, and it just won't help the kids from the poor background. I think the only fair and equal way to do it is to make everyone pay, but what people also don't remember is we don't actually pay it until, when I'm at university, we don't pay it until we actually start earning over a certain amount of money, and therefore if you do go to university and you've got £50,000 debt, and for some reason you don't do very well, or it's very hard for you to get to that upper bracket, you will never pay a penny back. And I don't see why that's unfair.
You speak of debt there, Luke. Well, the Labour Party want to abolish tuition fees, and you talk about all this debt that you're going to be in as a student because of tuition fees. What about the debt the Labour Party will be putting us in by abolishing tuition fees? Absolutely. How are you going to afford your £130 billion you're going to be spending on Trident, which, in my opinion, is completely unnecessary? How are you going to be affording stuff like this when you're about to abolish tuition fees?
All right, so on the point of tuition fees, that'll cost £11 billion a year, and as you know, the Labour Manifesto is fully funded and it's fully accounting, so it's all £48 billion. And I'll come back to the point that you made about Scotland, actually. The reason why Scottish education is failing so badly is because of the SNP government, not because of scrapping tuition fees. If it was such a failure, why do most countries in the Western world have no tuition fees? Why did Germany abolish theirs in 2014?
Because they didn't have a Labour government that just put us in so much debt from the last 13 years.
But George, it is a choice that Jeremy Corbyn's making not to uprate benefits, not to, basically keeping the benefits freeze, but giving mainly middle class students a lot of money back.
Well, I think, again, like you say, No. You're saying it's only going to benefit middle-class people.
No, I'm not saying it's only going to benefit, but predominantly.
Well, maybe so. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Okay, all right.
For the many.
All right, let's move on, because we've only got 4 minutes left. John is in Belfast. Hello, John.
Hi there, how you doing?
Fine, what would you like to say?
So I'm a young student. I'm 24, and I think that after the Manchester attack and all these other crazy things that are going around the world, security is pretty high on the list of concerns for most people, not just young people. And you've got the leaders of all the major parties that refuse to even name the threat. In the debate the other day, I saw the UKIP leader trying to talk about the threat from I think his words were Islamist extremism, and they all started heckling him and shouting him down and calling him racist. And Theresa May also refuses to call it Islamic extremism. She calls it Islamist, whatever that means.
Exactly.
Which has absolutely nothing. She says it's got absolutely nothing to do with the great faith of Islam, I think was the quote. And last year she said that Britain benefits greatly from Sharia law. This is all out of political correctness. So my question is, how can we trust any of the parties to deal with the problem if they're too scared to even identify it?
To fix a problem, the first thing you have to do is identify you have a problem. We need to stand up strong and say we have an Islamic terrorism problem in this country. And any people, anyone like in the debate who boos at that, who says that's racist, needs to seriously take a look at themselves. There's a lot of virtue signalling going on at the moment about this. We need to stand arm in arm and say what the problem is and fight it.
George?
Well, I think, yes, you've got to acknowledge the problem, but you've got to differentiate it and completely separate it from religion. Islam is a religion of peace, and some people are linking the religion of Islam right to these terrorist attacks, not extremists, but they are. They need to be called out for extremist terrorist attacks.
So can I ask you a question?
I think, sure, of course.
Let's say a terrorist attack goes off tomorrow. Are you saying that is just as likely to be, say, a Sikh as it is to be a Muslim?
If Well, you're talking about extreme. So you don't think extremism exists in other religions? You don't think the
Of course it
Westboro Baptist Church are an extreme, wing of Christianity?
Of course they do. I never denied it for a second.
When was the last time there was a Westboro Baptist Church attack? Name one, please.
What I'm saying. Okay, what about the gentleman?
You're saying it's as likely to be a Buddhist.
70 young people in Norway. Was his religion brought into this? Was his skin colour brought into this? No, it was not. We've got to differentiate religion and extremism.
Okay.
Because they are two separate entities.
I apologise to everyone, but we have run out of time, which I think is a terrible shame, because I think we could have gone on for several more hours at the very least. We could have given Majid Nawaz the day off, but he is sat here.
Yes,
it would be rude not to go to him. Look, George Aylett from Labour, I'm going to particularly thank you for stepping in at the last minute. We really appreciate it. It's been a great debate. Sebastian Cheek from UKIP, Luke King from the Conservatives, Zach Carr from the Lib Dems. Huge numbers of texts and tweets coming in. Just a couple more. Super group of people. Bring on more young voices. 21 is the right voting age. Fresh views, dynamic, says Francesca. Lee in St Leonard says, astonishingly good broadcasting. Listening to you every afternoon, can always rely on a great show, but the calibre and attitude of your participants today should be held up as an example for all. Thanks to all of you. And Ralph in Basildon, great to hear our young people putting our politicians to shame. Reasoned, mature arguments with no spite, malice or name calling. Absolutely brilliant. You can all go back to bed now. Thank you very much indeed. Now, coming up at 3, it's Ian Payne. I'll be back on Monday at 4, but next, Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Ian. Coming up, Islamist groups in Britain are undermining the fight against terrorism by peddling myths about the government's key anti-radicalisation policy called Prevent. That's according to a prominent British Muslim lawyer. What would you like the government to do better in addressing extremism? Before that, Theresa May is under pressure to say whether she believes that President Trump can renegotiate